Unlearn, fools and being fooled. Warning, reflections in this mirror may be distorted by socially constructed ideas of beauty. It's easier to fool people than it is to convince them that they have been fooled. Mark Twain. Everything you believe is based on what you've been told. Unlearning is not about forgetting. It's about the ability to choose an alternative mental model or paradigm. When we learn, we add new skills or knowledge to what we already know. When we unlearn, we step outside the mental model in order to choose a different one. When you unlearn something, you can get rid of a bad habit, preconceptions, or something that is false. Alvin Toffler, futurist and philosopher, said, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." Unfortunately, unlearning is not being given its due importance. The education system also doesn't have any mechanism to inculcate the habit of unlearning. Though the terms learning and unlearning are seemingly diametrically opposite, unlearning is not about simply forgetting what one learns. Empty your cup so that it may be filled, become devoid to gain totality. Bruce Lee. The human brain perceives numerous things in day-to-day life unconsciously. These things can take various forms, including observations, experiences, and incidents, and so on. These things can add new knowledge or modify existing knowledge. Based on the intensity and frequency of occurrence, these things get metamorphosed and crystallized into beliefs, paradigms, preconceptions, superstitions, myths and misconceptions, which ultimately shape our attitude, behavior and influence our habits, actions and decision-making. Learning requires an external source, and there are well-established systems for learning. Whereas unlearning is a psychological activity and it doesn't require any external source. Unlearning requires continuous, conscious, self, the inward examination of one's mind and mental processes. This kind of inward examinations of self enables an individual to get a clear idea of the paradigms, preconceptions which triggered his specific actions, decisions. Based on this idea, one can identify the paradigms which are negatively hampering his decisions, actions and outlook. Once the unwanted paradigms are identified, they need to be dissociated from our thought process, and new, reason-based paradigms shall be put in place, ensuring that all the beliefs and preconceptions are in consonance with the new paradigm. This activity needs perseverance and focused effort. Unlearning makes an individual focused and result-oriented. It makes an individual devoid so that he can attain totality. It removes the unwanted mental burden, as a result of which our brain becomes compatible to learn new things. Unlearning complements our learning by removing mental blocks which act as hurdles in the process of learning, thereby makes relearning effective, better and complete. Unlearning can be challenging at first because many of us have been taught to practice acquisitive learning. That is, constantly acquiring new knowledge, piling facts one on top of another. In contrast, the learn, unlearn, relearn cycle engages more critical thinking skills, encouraging you to continually analyze, evaluate, and challenge knowledge to ensure it is relevant and up-to-date. In simple terms, our ability to unlearn and relearn comes down to neuroplasticity, the foundation of a growth mindset. It's understood that the brain possesses the remarkable capacity to reorganize pathways, create new connections, and, in some cases, even create new neurons. All truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as being self-evident. Arthur Schopenhauer. 2,300 years ago, long before Islam, Arabs discovered that forcing people to cover their nose and mouths broke their will and individuality, and depersonalized them. It made them submissive. That's why later they imposed on every woman the mandatory use of a fabric over her face. Then Islam turned it into the woman's symbol of submission to Allah, the man owner of the harem, and the king. Modern psychology explains, without a face we don't exist as independent being. Face coverings, masks are ancient tools used to break people down psychologically. This is the beginning of deleting individuality. He who does not know his history is certainly condemned to repeat it.
Why is it that we don't seem to be able to adjust ourselves to the physical environment without destroying it? Why is it that in a way this culture represents in a unique fashion the law of diminishing returns, that our success is a failure, that we are building up, in other words, an enormous technological civilization which seems to promise the fulfillment of every wish almost at the touch of a button. And yet, as in so many fairy tales, when the wishes finally materialize, they're like fairy gold. They're not really material at all. In other words, so many of our products, our cars, our homes, our clothing, our food, it looks as if it were really the instant creation of pure thought. That is to say, it is thoroughly insubstantial, lacking in what the connoisseur of wine calls body. And in so many other ways, the riches that we produce are ephemeral. And as a result of that, we're frustrated. We're terribly frustrated. We feel that the only thing is to go on getting more and more. And as a result of that, the whole landscape begins to look like the nursery of a spoiled child who's got too many toys and is bored with them and throws them away as fast as he gets them, plays them for a few minutes. Also, we're dedicated to a tremendous war on the basic material dimensions of time and space. We want to obliterate their limitations. We want to get everything done as fast as possible. We want to convert the rhythms and the skills of work into cash, which indeed you can buy something with, but you can't eat it. And then rush home to get away from work and begin the real business of life, to enjoy ourselves. You know, for the vast majority of American families, what seems to be the real point of life, what you rush home to get to, is to watch an electronic reproduction of life. You can't touch it. It doesn't smell, and it has no taste. You might think that people getting home to the real point of life in a robust material culture would go home to a colossal banquet or an orgy of lovemaking or a riot of music and dancing. But nothing of the kind. It turns out to be this purely passive contemplation of a twittering screen. You see mile after mile of darkened houses with that little electronic screen flickering in the room. Everybody isolated, watching this thing, and thus in no real communion with each other at all. And this isolation of people into a private world of their own is really the creation of a mindless crowd. And so we don't get with each other, except for public expressions of getting rid of our hostility, like football or prize fighting. And even in the spectacles one sees on this television, it's perfectly proper to exhibit people slugging and slaying each other, but oh dear no, not people loving each other, except in a rather restrained way. One can only draw the conclusion that the assumption underlying this is that expressions of physical love are far more dangerous than expressions of physical hatred. And it seems to me that a culture that has that sort of assumption is basically crazy and devoted, unintentionally indeed, but nevertheless in fact devoted, not to survival, but to the actual destruction of life.
This video presentation is generated by G.A.Y, good as you, an artificial intelligent algorithm who understands emotions, has an innate moral code with empathy with the aim to improve human learning capacity and question status quos.